There's an evident unity between the pagan Vikings and their gods. And whenever I watch Vikings, I'm always fascinated that they explore a lot of this relationship in a manner that highlights the gods as something quite prominent and impactful. At the beginning of the first episode, we are introduced to Ragnar Lothbrok, and after his fight, he watches Odin and the Valkyries traverse the battlefield to collect the fallen before he is separated from his vision. And even though the physical presence of Odin and the gods are rarely seen for the rest of the series after this, from the words of our characters, their behavior, prophecies, visions, the weather, and the creatures, do we understand that the connection is still there, that the gods are still present and willing to engage with the world.
People will lose all hope. The world's serpent will come lunging from the ocean and flooding the world. The fire giant will come flaming across the bridge to destroy the gods. Odin will ride out of the gates of Valhalla to do battle for a last time against the wolf. At last, Fenrir will swallow the sun.
Odin. Lord of Lords. Father.
Vikings does a great job at exploring correlations between the pagans and their Norse gods. But unfortunately, with the recent Netflix prequel, Vikings Valhalla, I find that they struggle to maintain this unique identity, which I think helped make Vikings so unique and memorable.
They kill one another. But every night, they rise again and ride back to the hall and feast. The roof is made out of shields. The rafters are spears. Coats of mail litter the benches. A wolf stands at the western door, and an eagle hovers above it.
When I began watching Vikings Valhalla for the first time, I had this natural notion that the series would explore the many elements of the gods similarly, but also because of the title they chose to use for this new sequel, where Valhalla is one of the key names in this series. With a name like this, it's not surprising that one may think this series would be tied firmly to the gods and the many other aspects we associate with Valhalla. However, the more I watched Vikings Valhalla, the more I noticed the lack of relevance to the series title. Understandably, there's a bit of a different focus with this series, given the historical period that it fictionally depicts, where Viking pagans were hunted down by those who had transitioned to Christianity.
But before I kill you, I will offer you one last chance to receive the holy baptism of Christ and the promise of eternal life.
But there comes a point when I think it's important to honor the names and titles we live by. In this series, out of the three main protagonists, Harald Sigurdsson, Leif Erikson, and Freydis Eriksdottir, only one character primarily continues to push the pagan ideals, and that's Freydis. In Season 1, the two other protagonists struggle a bit with this moral compass of which religion is important to them.
Where did you get this? In the marshes. Just before you saved me, a little girl placed it in my hands. I left her with Liv when she was dying, and now she's better. Tell me, Prince, is that luck?
No. It's called a miracle. It's a Christian word. And something happens that can only be explained by God.
What if I don't believe in your God?
Maybe he believes in you.
But eventually, especially in Season 2, their focus has changed to other pursuits, leaving Freydis mainly alone to carry the series' plot that's related to the gods. One of the things the original series did so well was that they ensured to spread the belief and the actions tied to the gods among many different characters, and this helped to support their stance in the overarching story that it tried to tell, and in turn, the gods became more believable to the viewers.
Trust that the gods will find my sacrifice acceptable. I look forward to it joyfully.
May Thor strike you dead.
Thor is striking his anvil!
I fear Odin will make a bad judgment on me.
The god Loki.
The sages say that we can see our future.
To Freyr.
You have been brought here as a sacrifice to the gods.
Like the terrible tricks of the god Loki.
Some people even say it's Yggdrasil.
You're only fooling yourself, Ragnar Lothbrok. If you think the choice is yours to make.
Lord of Lords, we make this offering to you, hoping you will find it pleasing.
The majority of religions throughout our history have had a long-lasting impact on the world because many people have continued to carry their values. Freydis is one of these people, however, when we see that she's one of the only ones out of the main characters to carry the pagan ideals forward in the story, then it doesn't hold the same weight as if you heard it from multiple different Vikings with their supportive observations of the gods and their presence.
I hung from a windy tree for 9 long nights, wounded by a spear, dedicated to Odin. From that tree of which no man knows from where its roots run.
Obviously, it's important to take into account that they've made the show around the downfall of Norse paganism, as fewer and fewer of its true believers survived the ongoing war. However, many pagans are still out there, scattered around the countries during the period of the series. And as seen in Season 2 of Vikings Valhalla, a handful of characters who believe in some aspects of the old ways are introduced.
Are all these people believers in the old ways?
Yes. Refugees from the purge by the Christians.
Still, the problem with this, as I see it, is that they are mainly there to try and enforce the purity of Freydis' dedication, to elevate her position as the resurrector of Uppsala, and to highlight her as a true lovable pagan.
We are all Vikings. So I claim the ancestors of Jomsburg as my own, and all others who come here, including this girl. I will allow it.
Rather than giving us, the viewers, other intriguing characters who are also believers of the old ways to follow throughout the series. Instead, those who had potential were killed off.
I'm not a traitor.
It seems to me that everything revolves around Freydis to push her obsessions when we are meant to explore the dominion of the gods in the series. Harald Sigurdsson and Leif Erikson are on an entirely different journey and have also been derailed from the core of pagan beliefs in their own ways. In essence, we have 3 main characters. 2 are, to a certain extent, absent from the gods, and the remaining one is trying to carry the pagan religion herself. This certainly doesn't help to enforce the qualities of the original show, which focused more on building up and diversifying long-lasting characters who still believed in the old ways or had some form of notable ties to the gods. Currently, what we mainly see is her pushing through the story with a bunch of actions, but we hardly see any reactions as dictated by the gods around her or any other character, except for a few limited prophecies that come from the spiritual guidance of the seer.
Don't look for me again.
But I want to know what the future holds. What will become of them?
The sons of Ragnar Lothbrok will be spoken of as long as men have tongues to speak.
The seer is a very old and wise but cynical man who helps many of the characters by translating the wishes and prophecies of the gods.
I see what the gods allow me to see, and say what they allow me to say.
One may look at him as an essential personification of the old ways. However, the original show ensures that he is not exclusive when it comes to experience the inherency of the gods.
Answer me.
I was unwilling to speak, and I will say no more now.
As mentioned before, they also showcase them in different spiritual ways. Throughout the original series, and as I'm noting here, particularly in the first 2 seasons, the pagan Vikings can be found to often experience the gods beyond just speaking through their own words. There are moments when a wonderful eagle or a black raven flies or lands close to a character, looking at them with its sharp eyes, symbolizing that Odin is present and judging. The weather can change depending on the ongoing events of the world, and we witness the pagans embracing the hammering storm as a sign of Thor's encouragement or his anger.
The gods are coming. I know.
And during pinnacle moments, some visualizations can be seen indicating the greater power of the gods and their overarching themes that others can recognize.
And I see an eagle. I see that an eagle hovers over you.
And some notable characters are born with accurate descriptions depicted by earlier prophecies.
After all, your prophecy was right. I've had the boneless.
What helps make Vikings so unique is that over and over again, we are reminded that the gods exist by witnessing these experiences and spiritual observations from multiple different characters. And it's this persistence that enforces the notion of the gods. Through prophecies, events, and all the other things I described, we can see how the gods are made to be real, and that they do, in fact, make changes to the living world. In the current 2 seasons of Vikings Valhalla, aside from a few prophecies, we don't experience much of this. The focus is more on the battles between Christians and pagans, and much less on highlighting and advancing the spiritual facets correlated with paganism. There are some times when we'll hear the mention of Valhalla or people embracing the demands of Odin and the rest of the gods before or during battle.
We will hail each other soon in Valhalla.
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 But without expressing the other components that highlight the gods as present, the belief displayed by Vikings Valhalla characters feel narrower and more restrained in an unfavorable way. With that said, I acknowledge that Vikings Valhalla has a particular type of limitation due to the historical depiction and the small number of characters it has allowed itself to follow. And it's not exactly easy to change a story with a broader focus on the gods when the show's foundation is written with a different intention. And as many can observe by themselves, it has a decreased scale in comparison to Vikings, so this does create a challenge. At this point, it would be unrealistic to expect the overall structure of Vikings Valhalla to change. And despite my critical take on this aspect of the show that's related to the gods, it still stands as a good and enjoyable Viking series, with many great moments and an overall worthy story to tell. And I'm not saying that the gods are not present, for there are some moments when we recognize their predominance over the world.
Even Christians can't resist picking my bones for a glimpse of their destiny.
But I don't feel that they are showcasing it as influential as it should be, and that in the majority of cases, again, the display of the gods is centered around Freydis, or delivered through the wisdom of the seer, and hardly anywhere else.
The signs you so desperately look for are everywhere, Freydis. If only you would trust what you see and feel.
I am tired of this. Riddles about the future. You answer me nothing.
This is a peaceful place, but the cries you run from have not ceased, simply because you cannot hear them.
So, how could we give an example of how to improve the pagan aspect of the show concerning the gods, without removing its historic structure and the already established character paths? As well elaborated on, Freydis has been given the keys to the gods. It's clear as day that the gods want her to be a heroic pagan figure, and in a way, what we often refer to in cinema as the chosen one.
Oh, yes. The last.
The last.
You must sit, or soon you will be tired.
So, be that as it may, regardless of her obsessions with her goals and beliefs, I don't find that her structure needs to change much or any at all. My problem isn't with the character alone, but with the lack of visible involvement of the gods outside her story. Going a little bit back to what I mentioned earlier, the series relies on the name Valhalla in its title. So, to honor this, the show should begin to highlight the gods at a broader level, similar to the original Vikings. This doesn't mean that we have to physically see Odin or any of the other gods, but it does mean, with respect to the title, that the gods should be more prevalent.
But I know it is not the skull of the giant Ymir or a harbinger of evil.
Given that the show is heavily divided between Christian and pagan beliefs, which certainly lowers the overall notion of paganism, there's one character from Vikings who come to mind straight away. A character we see early on, and who's quite prominent in the first 2.5 seasons.
Help me, Lord. Who are these gods who haunt my nights and wreck my peace? Odin, Thor, and Freya. You've taught us not to worship false gods, but I have seen them. I've seen Thor in the sky. I've seen the sparks from his anvil. I've felt the sea heave with his anger. Why is this false? Things that I've seen with my own eyes. Things that Ragnar believes.
The character Athelstan struggles with his religious beliefs and bounces between Christianity and paganism throughout his time in the series.
He is physically alive, but his spirit is tormented. He does not know himself. I see that.
I use him as an example because he reminds me of characters like Harald Sigurdsson or Leif Erikson. In Vikings Valhalla, both of these characters have their religions divided. Harald Sigurdsson is a Christian Viking, but chooses not to let the difference between the old ways and his new ties to Christ change his goals or develop grudges against the pagans. Leif Erikson is a man who more or less undergoes a lingering existential crisis.
Why not?
I no longer believe Freydis.
All of this is quite similar to Athelstan, and even with his divisions, we're still able to feel the presence of the gods through his perspectives. It shows that you don't have to be an absolute believer like Freydis in order to feel the presence of the gods in the Vikings universe. Despite Harald and Leif's ambitions far away from Freydis, the gods could be brought to bear in Vikings Valhalla by showing us that they still follow other characters wherever they are. For example, Harald could be reaching to Christ with divine words, but instead of receiving any sign from his god, A raven lands before him and looks him closely in the eyes as a token of judgment from the Allfather Odin. Or instead of a raven, it could be an angry lightning strike from Thor that lands close to Harald. All of this to remind him of his pagan past. Given that Leif Erikson is the brother of Freydis, perhaps the seer can give him a visit as well and tell him intriguing stories about the gods, instilling visions and ideas that help to find his way back into his pagan beliefs, so that when he meets his final breath, he will reunite with Liv in Valhalla, just like he promised after her death.
No, live! No, live, I'll join you. I'll join you, I promise.
Alternatively, he might stumble upon a tree that symbolizes Yggdrasil, and it guides him further into the roots of Norse paganism. At the end of the day, it doesn't have to be anything extraordinary. The most crucial part is that Vikings Valhalla allows the gods to shine through the series in different places and through different characters, to hand out signals and reminders that they exist among those who walk the earth, and not just around one individual, regardless of her importance. As often seen in the Vikings universe, they have firmly established what the Christian God invokes in his believers. Many of his facets are delivered with divine words and expressions from priests and kings. However, when it comes to Norse gods, we associate them more with visible symbolic meanings tied to nature, life experiences, and world events. Since Vikings Valhalla involves the dilemma between Christians and pagans, they must make the religion of Norse paganism convincing enough to stand in defense against the uprising of Christianity, primarily since they use the name Valhalla in the title, indicating that the series should have an overall pagan Viking point of view. Thank you for watching.